Hey everyone, I'm Casey Rain from The Violet Reality, here with Kim Camellia in Minneapolis, in Prince's home city, and we are here for another episode of Uncovering Prince. And today, we're talking to Andy Kistner. Am I saying that right? Am I pronouncing it right? Perfect, perfect. And Andy is the author of this new book. It's called That One Time with Prince. Let's hold it up for the camera. You can get this right now on Amazon. I definitely would recommend it. Some of you may have been reading the blog of the same name that Andy's been doing for the past year or so. Is that about right? Yeah. And so this is the book version. Lots of cool stories. Andy worked with Prince for about 5 years. We're going to get into all the details of it now. So I think by the time we're done, you're definitely going to want to check this book out. So we'll kick off with the first question. I'll let Kim handle it.
So, when did you first start working for Prince, and how did that come about? Like, how did you get to work for him?
I actually the first time I started working somewhat indirectly for Prince, I was in high school. I was 16 years old. I worked for a lawn care service where we cut grass.
Yeah.
And Paisley Park and Prince's house were two of the accounts that we mowed. And, I would see, being at Prince's house, it was always kind of, it was always fun, kind of this mysterious place. Sometimes you'd see his, the gold BMW drive past, and, I would always kind of try not to look. But that lawn mowing job, actually, I went off to college for a year after that. And I came back, and I was going to do the same thing. I asked my boss, when are we going to start, Came back for the summer. I was going to do the same thing. The boss had actually quit the business, and he got a job as the estate manager at Paisley Park. So he's in charge of, groundskeeping and building and this and that, so at Paisley and at the house. And he told me, I was always a good worker for him, and he told me if there was anything available, he'd let me know. So a little bit of time went by, and he gave me a call, and he said he had about 3 months of work to do. It was turning the loading dock into the club that it is now, the live music venue. And it was only supposed to be about 3 months, and it was kind of a manual labor job.
All right.
And I had no idea that 3 months had turned into, over 5 years working out there. Yeah, it was.
What year was this?
That was in '96,
Right.
sometime probably in the summer of '96.
Initially, you came into Paisley through your boss. You worked there, and how did that turn into working on what you just said, the loading dock, and turning that into the live venue? How did that then translate into working for Prince in different roles, and what kind of roles were they?
That's actually a good question. It sort of organically kind of evolved into it. I think it may have been, there weren't too many people out there at the time. It was kind of a skeleton crew. And I think that I was around long enough where Prince started kind of seeing me around.
Yeah.
So he knew I was one of the guys that was out there. And there wasn't an official day where anyone came up to me and said, "Hey, we're going to sign you on full time, here it is." It just sort of evolved from turning this manual labor job, this club, it was rough too. There's, concrete floors and, chain link fence storage areas. And it was a straight on loading dock that looked like it was in a factory. And I remember the first time that I actually saw Prince. I was there was this room. It's been a long time, but I think it was his Studio C. There was this back room to it, and I was doing something in there, and besides my lawn mowing boss, the guy I was working with at the time was the production manager on whatever tour was out.
Right.
And so I'm in this room, and Prince comes in and he asks me, where this guy is. Where's what's his name? And I'm like, oh shoot, oh my God, it's Prince. And it was weird because the guy told me before, It's kind of funny. The advice he gave me was, "You're gonna see Prince. You're gonna see Prince," and he told me your best bet is if he comes around, just honestly act like he's not there. Just give him his space and act like he's not there. So when Prince actually asked me something, I'm like, what do I talk to him or what? So yeah, that was the first time I remember I saw Prince, and I don't know. It just sort of kind of evolved where I just kept coming, and I outlasted that boss. I outlasted the boss after him. I also outlasted the boss after him, and I just kind of became a permanent part out there for a while.
Wow. Wow. One thing that's come up quite a lot we've been at the symposium this week, the Prince from Minneapolis symposium. Lots of panel talks from people that worked with or for Prince. One thing that's come up quite a lot is that his attitude towards a lot of the people that were around was that if something needed doing, he didn't care who had the qualifications or the ability to do something. It was just whoever was the nearest guy. It was like, hey, I need this. Oh, you're here. You do it. Was that your experience?
Exactly. Even in the book, and I think it's on the blog too. I told about a time where he was doing an interview for, I'm going to date myself a bit. It was Yahoo Internet Life magazine. And he told me about it, and he said that he wanted me to be the photographer for it. And I mean, I don't have any photography experience. That was before smartphones. I mean, the best camera I had was probably one of the cardboard disposable kind. And I remember, so I called this editor at Yahoo, and I was telling her that I was going to be the photographer. I'm going to be the one taking the pictures. And she basically said, thanks but no thanks. We have our guy. So all right, fine. So I went and told Prince, hey, they have their own photographer, no need. And he's like, no, I want you taking the photos. Okay. So what do I do? He's like, call her back. So I called her back, and I told her again, I'm like, I talked to him and he wants me taking the photos. And she kind of warmed up a little bit, and she started asking me about my portfolio, my photography portfolio, and this and that. And I can't remember exactly how I wrote, but I told her, I don't have a portfolio. And she kind of asked me, and I came out like, I'm not a photographer. And she thought I was nuts for wanting to take these pictures. And I remember telling him, like, you don't understand. Like, I'm on the phone. You don't understand. Like, he wants me taking the pictures. And so that went back and forth. And in a nutshell, she actually ended up getting stock photos. Like, she wouldn't cave and he wouldn't cave. So stock photos, problem solved. That's it.
Wow. Wow. That's pretty crazy. Hucky Austin, who was Prince's bodyguard for a while, I don't know if his time overlapped with yours at all. He mentioned something in a panel talk about how did you know, like, what Prince you were getting day to day, in the sense that sometimes he'd be the friendliest guy and he'd be like laughing and joking, and sometimes he would just like walk in and just be like super mad, and just like whoever was near, he would just like lay into him, even if it had nothing to do with them. He just needed to unleash on somebody. And Hucky kind of said something like, if Prince was dressed in a little bit more casual, I guess as far as Prince casual goes, is still better dressed than your regular guy, then he was more likely to be in a kind of playful mood. And if he was like dressed to the nines, he's more likely to get mad at somebody and be very professional and stuff like that.
I can see that, actually. Just thinking back, the Prince I remember, there wasn't much casual, that's for sure. There is one time I do remember we, for some reason, I don't know what brought it on, how it came about. It was Prince himself who decided he wanted to have a company softball game at the Lake Ann Park right across the street from Paisley Park. It's changed now, but before it was just easy drive in. And he wanted to have a softball game. So he told my buddy to go out and get a bunch of softball gear. And we went out to the softball park. And the thing that sticks out in my head is in his casual softball clothes, he was wearing like a pair of furry boots, like his, probably even winter boots. I'm like, wow, man. And it was, it was so weird. I don't even really recall any times where I think, oh, he's dressed even a little bit down. He was always really, really nicely dressed. And there was some times when he's playing basketball, you have like a t-shirt on. But other than that, I never really associated the wardrobe with the attitude. But there's definitely some Gemini there where you could get one or the other. And it kept everybody on their toes. It really did, for sure.
So before you started working for Prince, were you actually like, did you know Prince's music well, and like, did you know the people associated with him, or like the history behind him? Were you like a really big fan of him, or not so much? Or?
I actually did not know much about him at all. In fact, I was telling a story where when I started working out there full time, I would hear the names Wendy and Lisa over and over and over. Wendy and Lisa, Wendy and Lisa. I just hear the names over and over. And I honestly thought Wendy and Lisa were two people that worked in the accounting office. Like I knew nothing about it. I didn't know why Wendy and Lisa were so important. I don't know why these, accountants were so important or whatever. And I didn't know a lot about them. And I almost think that's why he kind of liked me. When I was out there, no one stuck around really for 5 years. It was usually a quicker turnaround. And I think I might have lasted because maybe it was refreshing a little bit, because he did have a lot of fans gravitate towards Paisley Park. Yeah. He would honestly have, a lot of fans working for him. And I just never was. And I would hear, I remember it took me forever to figure out what Computer Blue was. I had no clue. And I probably saw Purple Rain in maybe, 2003, 2004. And after I left, I saw Purple Rain finally. And when I saw Purple Rain, the coolest thing that I remember was seeing Billy Sparks. Because I knew Billy before I saw Purple Rain, and he was one of the nicest guys to me out there. It was like, there's a lot of egos in the rock and roll business. They're just, you're gonna find them. And there's someone about who was so nice to me all the time. And he knew I was kind of one of Prince's guys, and he treated me really good all the time out there. So that was kind of interesting. But another thing, from not really being, obviously won me over when I was out there. He's a genius. So he did win me over. But one thing that was interesting was my first experience with almost his entire library of music, I heard for the first time live. And when I heard an album version of something, when a friend would put a track on, and I'd look at my friend and like, what the heck is this? And he'd be like, oh yeah, that's such and such song. I would look at him like, that's not what I'm used to. So he's I think it's a little bit rare all throughout music to find someone where you would actually prefer the live version over an album version of a song. But that's how it was with him. I really fell in love with the live versions of these songs, and some of the recorded album versions, like, I don't even recognize when they started playing. So that was kind of a unique thing about getting to know him when I was out there instead of being a fan moving into to Paisley.
Given that you didn't know that much about him when you started working there, and so that your first exposure to a lot of things about him, as you said, is literally just seeing it happen, when was your first moment that it hit you like, wow, this guy is an actual genius? Like, because we see, like, as fans, like, we're used to like seeing him like shred a guitar, go over to the keyboard, shred the keyboard, go over to the drums, just nail a groove, and it's just like, it's like we know that innately. But I'm trying to imagine like what it's like to not know that and then see it, and then be like, what the hell?
Oh, wow, that's funny. I did not know he played guitar. I had no idea he played guitar. So it was the first time when that loading dock was converted into the club. It's the first time I saw him play. When I saw him play guitar, I'm like, are you kidding me? What? And yeah, so that's the first time where I realized, wow, this guy is pretty legit. Yeah, it was the first time I actually saw him play was when it clicked, and like this guy is out of his mind. It's just nuts. Yeah, that was that was that's when I knew that he is who he is when I saw him play for the first time.
You must be one of like the only people, if not the only person, whose first experience of seeing Prince play guitar is like 10 feet away from you. That's pretty mad.
If you think back on your time working for Prince and being around Prince, what would sort of be like your favorite moment with him, or like a moment that had the most impact on you, or maybe like something that you may have even written about in your book or in your blog?
It's actually a story both on the blog and in the book. It was when it's really weird looking back. I've been an artist, a visual artist all my life. I paint and sketch and draw. And Prince, I was out there long enough where Prince actually kind of started to know that about me. And there was one day where we were walking from the back of the building to the front, and we were walking through the atrium area, and there's a group of people. And he looks at me, he says, Griff, I want to see what that wall looks like if it was painted blue. They call me Griff out there. That's what Prince knew me as. And I didn't know what to think. I want to see what that wall looks like if it's painted blue. I don't know what he's talking about. He's like, and he looks at me, he says, you just put it in the computer and, turn it blue and see what it looks like. And I looked at him, and I told him, I don't know how to do that. He's like, you don't know how to do that? You need to go to school. And he actually, literally, he paid for me to go take a Photoshop class. And that was the first time in my life I've ever had any experience with Photoshop. And that pretty much changed me as an artist, just getting into a digital medium. It blew my mind what you could do in Photoshop. And it was one of the moments where I look back and it was like he really honestly wanted to give me a shot as an artist. Now, as a middle-aged man, I look back, no one else has given me that shot. Outside of family and friends, an artist ego really doesn't count family and friends because you think to yourself they have to like your stuff. But yeah, so outside of that, he was one of the only people that really honestly like believed in me as a visual artist, wanted to give me a shot. And I did actually go to school. I took the Photoshop class, and thinking back, I was so young back then. I really should have appreciated a lot more. Like that's more than almost any boss in my entire life has done for me, is something that generous and something to just help me grow into, I was very passionate about art, and it was something he did that I don't know if there's any other boss that really nurtured that with me. So that was a time that sticks out where it was I don't know, just pretty unique, kind of special moment.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm just remembering this from memory, but I think I read on your blog and maybe even saw a photo that a sketch that you did got monogrammed into the carpet in a room in Paisley Park or on a wall or something like that. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I used to draw all the time out there. And looking back, it's my art, honestly, I don't think it was that good even. and it was very unpolished, very rough, very amateurish. But he saw through that, and I did a sketch that actually ended up on a T-shirt. That it's a sketch where I don't know if some of the fans have probably seen it. It was at Paisley Park for a while. It was inlaid into the game room floor, so it's a thick record album with a Prince symbol as a needle, with just a set of hands with a big, old school hip hop ring, saying MPG. And for some reason, he liked that. And I was pretty flattered, That's the first time I've had anyone do anything with my art. And I remember someone told me that, I think the merchandise person told me it was the number one T-shirt at a couple of concerts. So that was kind of cool because it was so unique. It was so different from everything else. And God, I remember when that game room was first being built. We hauled that carpet up there and rolled it out, and there's my design, just 15 feet wide in the carpet. So that was something really cool. And I heard they pulled up that carpet now. I think Paisley has changed a lot since I've been out there. I honestly haven't been out there since I've been out there 2 times since I quit in 20 years or whatever. Yeah, that was one of the things that he did. Just one of the things he showed me how he trusted me as an artist, And also, I ended up doing the original concept sketch for that round building out there.
Nice, the egg.
Yeah. So the contractors changed it quite a bit from the drawing, but the original concept sketch was my drawing. And it's funny, that building it changed so many times what it was supposed to be. I don't even know what it is now. At one point it was going to be, it changed so many. It was going to be like a vegan restaurant. At one point it was going to be a school. He wanted, I remember him having a concept of, I don't know what age range he was thinking about, but I remember him having a concept of a school with no grades, like no grading system. So there was going to be that for a while, and then I think when I was out there, it was flat out storage, really. So I didn't really become of anything. But yeah, those are some times where you actually use me as an artist to do some things. So that was those are fun memories too.
It's great that you brought that up, because actually I had no idea that you knew anything about the egg, and I always ask people about it because it's so mysterious. Like when we were interviewing one of the people that works at Paisley now at the museum, Angie, the head of archives, she said that she found, or they'd found some plans that indicated at one point he wanted it to be a club, and then they couldn't get a license for a club out in rural Chanhassen. And then other people say restaurant and a school. So I think it's one of those things that just he had lots of different ideas, and then none of them ever landed. Storage it ended up being. One thing that I wanted to touch on a little bit is that lots of people, I would say most people that worked in any capacity for or with Prince, have said that it was a very rewarding but also incredibly demanding job to have, and that one work year with Prince was like 5 work years in another job, and that's why the turnover was so high. He would call people in the middle of the night and whatever, and you had to be ready whenever he needed you to do something. And could you talk a little bit about that and what that was like for sort of the things that you did and the roles that you had there?
Yeah, you were more or less on call 24 hours a day. I remember you could have plans, 3 months in advance, and your plans are all set. It's all good. Everything's good. And the day before or day of your big event that you have, nope, gotta go to work. You're on call all the time. And there were times where, we'd get there No one started too early. It was probably, as I recall, it was probably like 10 o'clock in the morning was probably the start time out there. But there'd be times where you get there at 10 o'clock in the morning and you wouldn't leave until 5 a.m. the next day. Eve, that's, sometimes you didn't even get to leave. You go take a nap wherever you could and, just get back at it right when you're a little bit rested. So, yeah, it was a very demanding job, very demanding on call all the time. And it's tough to have a work-life balance when you're doing that. It was a little bit easier because I lived with some of the other Paisley guys. So having them as roommates, everyone kind of knew the chaos. So it was a little bit easier. Everyone was kind of in that routine. But yeah, it was a very demanding job. And looking back, I honestly don't think I could do it right now. I really don't. It was a good job for a young me, but old me just has the memories of it. I don't think I can do it again.
So aside from the really, really demanding working schedule that you had, were there any particularly frustrating parts about the job that you found whilst you were working?
I would probably say one of the most frustrating things was how much of a perfectionist he was. And I mean, I got to see that probably in a little different ways than other people did because I wasn't literally in the studio while he was recording songs or anything like that. I saw him as a perfectionist where if we spent all day long, moving the stage in the club or, building the stage, setting up risers or doing who knows what, and you're just exhausted after a long day, Prince comes in, I want that shifted over 8 inches to the right. And basically everything you did, your long day, and it just clicked. You know that you're there all night long again. So that was pretty tough, dealing with his, how much of a perfectionist he was. And, looking back, after he passed, I kind of have a little bit different view. After he passed, I started thinking about things, and the guy's a flat-out genius, or he was a flat-out genius. There's no question about it. And I just imagine that sort of genius, he probably had a pretty rough time as a kid, just rough time growing up. When you're at that level, I can't imagine a lot of your little kid peers even understand you at all. And I kind of don't think you could even help having a little bit of those eccentric characteristics or things like that, or being such a perfectionist. So yeah, I kind of cut him a break now a little bit more than I did back then. But him being a perfectionist, I would record every single live show that he did with his, he had this big clunky, it was the 90s, so he had this big clunky, professional VHS camera. And he would actually take he thought really highly of those show tapes. He would watch every one of those show tapes he would watch. I don't know if I recorded him, playing 1,000 times between shows and rehearsals and, sound checks. But he kept those tapes in really high regard. He'd almost study them like an athlete would study game film. He would, if he tried something new during the show, he would watch the tape, and you could and I could kind of see the progress of these things taking shape. You'd see even new songs being created just from him watching the tape and going back and forth. And so he'd fine tune things with each time he watched the tape. And those really important. That was just all brings back how much of a perfectionist he was. So what made him great was also one of the things that made him a kind of a tough boss. Yeah.
Did you ever spend any time inside the vault?
This is actually a story. in the book. I was in the vault one time. 5 years I was out there. I was in the vault one time. And I think I spent more time, I don't even know if it's still there. Somehow I had to paint another art project that I did. I painted his symbol on the door of the vault. And it was, we hung some black lights as in blacklight paint. But I remember I was downtown Minneapolis with a buddy. We're going to see a show. And, this is in the book. Hopefully I'm not, giving away too much of the story that's in the book, but I'll just tell it anyway. So we're downtown Minneapolis going to see, I remember it was the Foo Fighters touring with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So we're downtown, and when you're in the rock and roll business, going to concerts, not like being a regular person. Yeah. We were at the back door of the venue, waiting for somebody to come out and give us backstage passes, and we can walk around wherever we want. That's kind of how it goes. So we're waiting outside the back door. My buddy gets a phone call. He's like, Griff, he wants to go to work. All right. So before I even got into the show, back to Paisley, and for some reason he was in the vault. It was him and the studio engineer at the time. They're down in the vault. And so I walked in, and I remember him showing me there's like 2 rooms to the vault. There's this the first room had a bunch of like knickknacks, awards, things like that. And he showed me a framed picture. And he asked me, he's like, do you know who did that picture? Of course I don't know who did that picture. That's the first time I've been in the vault. And he said, I did that. And it was just kind of a moment where, one more time, where it just made me, I don't know if he would have showed anyone that, not, because he knew I was an artist. So I think he wanted to show me what he did as a visual artist too. So I just remember, I'm like, wow, that's cool. And I asked him, like, do you still draw? And he's like, no, I used to like it when I was younger, but yeah, he told me he doesn't really draw anymore, but he had that one frame picture. And so I was in the vault, and I just recall aisles of recording reels. And honestly, I don't even know really why I was there. I wasn't really doing much. The studio engineer, he didn't need much help, whatever he was doing. And I started thinking about, like, why was I even here? And it's kind of cool. And maybe Prince just wanted a chance to, show me the vault, show me his drawing he did. But another thing about that night, when I got down there, he asked me, he's like, oh, what are we doing? What's going on? I'm like, oh, we're about to go see the concert. We're about to see Red Hot Chili Peppers and Foo Fighters. And he looks, he's like, why didn't anybody tell me about it? He's like, I would have went. I'm like, I don't know. So I always thought that it was cool that he wanted to go see that show anyway. But yeah, that was the one time I was in the vault, and Prince showed me his drawing that he did.
And what about being in the studio, seeing him record songs and things like that? Did he spend a lot of time helping out in the studio, or just wandering in and out? Or
I didn't spend a lot of time in the studios, especially when he was recording. I remember one of the things I had to do was water the pianos. I had no idea any sort of piano took any sort of water, but there was, I had to crawl under the piano and fill this little humidifier water dish. So I was in the studio a lot for watering the pianos. And so when he literally was recording, I was never really spent too much time in the studio, but I do remember if he was in the studio and something came up where you had to talk to him or get his attention, you'd look through the little window, and he was huge on nonverbal communication. Yeah. He had looks. He had all sorts of looks. And if you could make eye contact with him through the window, you kind of, develop your own sort of nonverbal communication, And sometimes he'd, give you his full attention, and sometimes you knew he saw you, but he'd just flat out act like he didn't. So yeah, I never really spent much time literally in the studio during the recording. But one thing I do remember is when when he was out at the piano or something, he had the piano out in the atrium. He would a lot of the songs I think started out. He had an old like 1980s. Like cassette player recorder, and it was old enough where it had like the pop-up top on it where you hit the two buttons together to record, and he had that, I mean, the entire time I was out there. So that's one thing I remember about how I imagine a whole bunch of songs were actually born is on that old time cassette tape or cassette recorder.
So at Paisley, who would you say were the people you got along with the most, and like in what sort of areas did they work, and like just that sort of thing? Yeah, like who you got along with the best, and like how those relationships sort of like started and like developed further along the way.
There weren't a lot of people working out there at the time. So the people that I kind of connected with, there was almost two sides of Paisley Park. There was like the front of the building and the back of the building. Front of the building, were people in offices doing who knows what. The back of the building is where the club was. It's where, the music videos were shot. It's where photo shoots were. So there's a handful of guys that, were in the back part of the building, really. And those are the guys were really in the trenches. With, and I'd work closely as well on tour with a lot of the backline guys, the roadies. I went on tour as well as worked at Paisley Park, and I was so young out there that I really had to grow up fast. I mean, you're getting thrown into this world. You're traveling with, I was 19. These guys were all probably 30s at the time, mid 30s, I don't know, somewhere around there. And it's rock and roll's a big business, and there's a lot to learn about being on the road and everything. So we had a really good group of guys that kind of took me under their wing, and really showed me the ropes, and really had patience with a young guy out there. I was young and dumb. I didn't know what was going on. And so those guys were really sort of to me, kind of the heart and soul of Paisley Park out there. And one of the other things that was kind of fun is, besides your peers, some of the other musicians that were out there that I got to meet a little bit, and a friend of mine, it's funny, a friend of mine was telling me about a documentary, it was on YouTube, and I can't remember the name of it. I don't know if you're supposed to plug stuff like this or not, but it was a funk documentary on YouTube, like the history of funk or something like that. And my buddy told me, hey, you should watch this and just see how many people that that you got to work alongside. And I started watching it, and yeah, I mean, there's, Larry Graham, Jerry Martini, George Clinton. I see all these, people that I worked with at least a little bit out there, and you start to realize like these guys are some pretty major players, and a lot of them, like Jerry and Cynthia from Sly and the Family Stone, let alone being musicians, they were a couple of the, honest to God, the nicest people I've ever met in my entire life. And so just looking back, so there, aside from my coworker peers, there were some musicians and things like that left lasting memories on me. I'll remember those people forever as being some of the nicest people I've ever met. Yeah.
Did you work on the Rave Un2 The Year 2000 concert, the New Year's concert for 1999 going into 2000?
Yes, I did. And so that's the show where Now this is a little bit of a blur. It was a long time ago, and for a while, I honestly wanted to forget that time of my life. You know, I went through a rough patch, didn't even want to think about that. So some of the piecing together some of the memories again is a little sketchy. But that Rave Un2 The Year 2000 show, I believe that's where I met the director Kevin Smith, and I didn't know who he was. There was a guy out there who was working like for events like that where we would hire people that were there for a week or so, you know. So there were a lot of people that worked at Paisley Park at one time or another, but you know, these people would come in for a week to help us out. And I remember this guy came up to me. He's like, "Oh my God, you've got to come out back!" And you know, he's smoking a cigarette with this dude, and he was so excited to introduce me to this guy, and I just remember, no clue at all who he was, and it was just the most awkward thing whatsoever you could even imagine. And piecing it all back together, I honestly think it was Kevin Smith, like just with beard and everything. But yeah, that was a really fun time. I really liked doing the events out there. It was big deal. They had, I mean, it was a pretty star-studded show that night. And yeah, it was actually really fun, just kind of seeing that behind the scenes too, you know, seeing the stuntman dressed like Morris Time, you know, swinging in on a vine. Yeah, it was those big events were really fun to do, just because they were such a big deal, and you got to be part of it. You know, you got to see how it went together, and you got to actually help put that big event together that, you know, that so many people were entertained by, and you know, and watching. That was one thing about being on tour as well, is, you know, just being part of that, a part of that concert that brings so many people so much joy. And it was always such a weird feeling, because I was out at the front of house area for every show, videotaping the shows. And there was something so special to me anyway. You know, I'm sure a lot of these other guys, that's what they do. They've been doing all their life. It's their career. That's, you know, so I think for me, it may have been different. I don't know if everyone gets the same experience, or the same feeling, but there was something when you're getting ready for the show, you know, I'm back behind the camera and the house lights turn off and the crowd just explodes. There's something, the only word I can think is there's something electric about it. It was so special to me being a part of that. I mean, you have, you know, 10,000 people going crazy for something that you are really highly involved in. That was, that was one of the greatest experiences, just actually to kind of be part of that. It was just a wonderful time.
Given the sort of various tasks that you had to do in working at Paisley and for Prince, obviously you, as we've covered, you got more than a glimpse into his professional life, but I guess you also would have seen into his personal life a little bit, and given the years that you were there, maybe had some interactions with both Maite and Manuela. Could you talk a little bit about what your impressions of both of them were like, and things like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Looking back, so I was out there for both wives, and God, was I out there? I think I was out there when they first actually got married, and it was really, you know, I didn't see a whole lot of them, because when they were around, it was usually Prince around, and it wasn't, the opportunity didn't present itself a lot to, you know, get chummy with, you know, Maite or Manuela. But they both, made just such a nice lasting impression on me. They were both such nice, such nice women. I knew Manuela when she was, working on tour and everything, and she was just so nice and sweet, and she was kind of like one of us. Where when I moved out there, Maite was already, I think they got married right when I was out there. So yeah, it's I honestly didn't keep in touch with either of them. But they both left really pleasant, lasting memories with me.
So after years of working there, you obviously made the decision to stop working there and then move on to something else. Could you tell us a little bit more about when you decided to stop working for Prince and also why?
It's kind of interesting. My whole time out there, there was obviously a lot of turnaround, and a lot of that turnaround wasn't voluntary. So looking back at that whole span, I think I was one of the only people that actually left on his own. It was late at night. So I was working on, this is right when Prince started to give me a little more as far as duties as an artist. He had me working on the lyric book for the Rainbow Children. So again, probably got there about 10 o'clock in the morning. Work all day till probably 8 o'clock. And granted, I kind of didn't know what I was doing. Like he did send me to the Photoshop class, but one semester of Photoshop, you're not really the guy who should be designing a lyric book for an international rock star. But I was. And so work all day on that. And it was really tough. I think what kind of started to wear on me a little bit was, again, brought up kind of the work-life balance, where it was, all Prince all the time. There wasn't much of a life outside of that. Even trying to go to a concert, get called back, So working on the lyric book for the Rainbow Children. Probably about 8 o'clock at night, Prince comes up to the art director office and he takes a look at the progress. He says, all right, looking good, done for the day. So I go home, and I had talked with friends and everything about leaving, just because it's hard to have a relationship or anything when you're on call like that. It's difficult, flat out, difficult. So working on the lyric book for the Rainbow Children, probably 8 o'clock, Prince tells me to go home. So ends up about 1 o'clock in the morning, I'd say. My buddy gets a call from Prince and hands me the phone, and I'm talking to Prince on the phone like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I remember he's kind of upset about this lyric book not being done. And I'm telling him, I'm like, you told me I could go home, but what are you talking about? You literally said it looked good, you can go home. And I couldn't get that into his head. I'm like, you told me it was good. So I went back into Paisley Park that night. And that wasn't uncommon either. Thinking you're done with work, going back the same day even. So I was dating this girl at the time, and I told her, I think this is the night I'm actually going to quit. So I end up at the studio, probably about 1:30 in the morning. Prince meets me at the side door. And one thing about the guy, he would definitely push people. He definitely pushed people, but I think he could honestly sense when they're kind of at their breaking point, and he would let off a little bit. It was just uncanny how he could kind of. So I got to Paisley, met Prince in the side door in that side parking lot, and he let me in. He's just super nice, just being super nice guy. I'm like, oh wow. So we walk up to the art director office, and I'm finishing this lyric book for the Rainbow Children, not really knowing what I'm doing. I'm kind of sort of figuring things out as I go. Prince walks up and he sits down and he starts asking about about the book and starts talking about what we're going to do after this book is over, some of the other projects. And I told him, I'm like, I'm going to finish this for you, but after this, I'm done. And he looks at me, he says, Dunn hasn't quit. And it's weird. And I actually wrote this in the book. Just wondering, it's so weird because I can pinpoint that literally one exact moment in my life where I could have gone two completely different ways, like completely opposite. As Prince asked me, Dunn hasn't quit. And I told him, yeah, I'm quitting after this. And he asked me, he's like, what are you going to do? And I told him, I'm going to study animation. He's like, in Minnesota, animation in Minnesota? You can't do animation in Minnesota. There's no animation in Minnesota. And I didn't care. I was ready to, take over the world. I was so confident in myself that I didn't care, what he had to say. So I finished that. I finished the lyric before him. I remember, God, I was up all night long. I ended up going to Kinko. It was at 8 a.m, just tired as can be, trying to get everything put together. And I actually did quit. Didn't come back. There was some time had passed. I don't really know the exact time frame. But I had moved away from the house with the Paisley guys, moved in with some other guys, and the Rainbow Children actually came out. And listening to it with my roommate, and we're pulled it up on the computer, just kind of listening to the first part of little tracks and skipping through. And then we got to track number 13, which I think it's track number 13, I might be wrong, which is The Everlasting Now. And the song sounded different. Obviously, it was different. It was recorded. It was a live recording that ended up on that album, where it seemed like everything else was studio stuff. And the first line of that song, I believe it goes, I knew this dude, he was cool, he used to rule until he went to school. I got such a particular, weird feeling when I heard that, because that's the exact same conversation I just had with Prince when I quit. I still had, there's a different studio engineer, still had his phone number. I called him up. I asked him, is that song, is that song about me? And he said, yeah, it is. So that was always kind of cool looking back. Hindsight's always 20/20. I don't know if in different scenarios I would have stayed, or if I made the right decision or wrong decision. But it's always kind of interesting to think that that song probably wouldn't even exist without me out there, and without me quitting even. And I don't know, it just kind of it was just sort of a weird feeling, and I don't even know, even to this day, if I listen to the song, I'm not even exactly sure how I'm supposed to interpret that, listening to that first verse. But anyway, I'm one of the few people I know of that actually quit on their own and said goodbye to him. Yeah.
Was that the last time you saw him, or did you see him again in the years that followed and up until his passing?
Saw him 2 times after that. 2 times. First time was one of the late night parties. I don't know why I went, what was going on. I don't know if I was going to say hi to some old friends or whatever. So get to the party, whatever. And I'm sitting there kind of towards the back of the room, and Prince and Manuel are there, and I look over and I see him, and he makes eye contact with me. I'm like, hey, and I remember he kind of whispered something, and man was here. They both had a laugh. I don't know. He took some dig at me or something, and that was the first time I saw him. And second time I saw him was probably about 6 months before he died. Hadn't been out there forever. Didn't. It was such weird memories thinking about that. Nothing really. Part of me didn't even want to go back. And just let it be. So I went out. It was we probably got there at probably 1:30, 2 in the morning. Or we're not even sure if he's going to still be playing. So we get back, and it was my brother and me, and it was after my class reunion. A friend of mine, an old classmate, we went. And it was funny. It took some convincing too, because at my class reunion, I just mentioned something about Prince playing. Obviously, they'd asked me about Prince or whatever, and it took a lot of convincing. I didn't want to go, and finally, I caved. I'm like, okay, let's go. So we get out there, and I got to see him play for a little bit. Probably, I don't know how long it was, half hour or something like that. And it was nice. I still saw the old friends that I knew from way back when. It was awesome getting to see these old people I haven't seen in such a long time. And so performance is over. The room's clearing out. I'm just saying hi to some people. And I see Prince walk back in. I'm like, okay. What do I do? So I decided, all right, I'm going to go say hi. So he sat down on the stairs at the backside of the building, or the backside of the room, and I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna do it. So I walked up to him, and must have looked so dumb. I was so excited. I'm like, hey, Prince, it's Griff, and the reunion didn't go exactly well. He looked at me, and he kind of that look that I remember so well. He just kind of gave me this weird look, kind of rolled his eyes, like, yeah, whatever. And my old classmate said, maybe he didn't recognize you, or maybe didn't know who you were, and I think he did. I think if he didn't know who I was, it would have been a little more cordial, maybe a little, hey, just a little hi, whatever, something. So yeah, the two times that I saw him after I quit didn't exactly go great. And I don't know what I expected either, I guess I did basically walk out on the guy when he was offering me this opportunity, this art opportunity. So, yeah, I don't know if that came back and stuck with him when he saw me again. But yeah, it wasn't a great reunion, that's for sure.
Where were you, and how did you feel when Prince passed away on the 21st of April in 2016, as we all know, and how did that lead to you writing your book?
I was at home at the time. It was, I think, sometime in the morning. I got a text from someone saying there's something going on at Paisley Park on the news. And I flipped on the news, and it was a big mystery at first. There wasn't really any information. No one knew what happened or what was going on. There's just cops everywhere and just a whole bunch of questions, really. And then, I think it came out first that, somebody died. And I think it just slowly sort of came out that it was Prince. And I remember that I was actually way sadder than I ever thought I would be, it's really weird. I guess spending, over 5 years with somebody, I saw him quite a bit out there. I guess that, whether you like it or not, is going to create some bond. And yeah, I was bummed. I was super sad, and it was so weird. It took a while to actually sink in and set in that it actually, because as Prince, he's not supposed to die, So yeah, it it was just so. But I do remember I was a lot sadder than I ever thought I was gonna, or ever thought I would be, or something like that. And one of the things that was kind of nice was friends reaching out to me, because they did know that I spent that amount of time out there, and like a lot of people would call and text, "Hey, how you doing?" So that felt really good, just know you have friends out there. Just they got something as bizarre as Prince's passing. They got your back, just making sure you're doing okay. So that was a really good feeling that came from it for me, is just knowing that I have this big group of friends out there to help me out. And then the telling the stories is kind of funny, because after he passed, you started hearing stories from people, and former employees, other celebrities, and I don't even know who they were, but there's some people where I didn't even really believe what they were saying. So they're acting like they're best friends with Prince, and I mean that's a tough gig right there. Prince didn't let anyone in close like that. So yeah, I don't know. Just having friends talk to me and this and that, and seeing all these other stories being shared, and even thinking back to those times, like I mentioned before, a lot of those memories I tried to block away, and didn't even want to touch that time of my life again. So with his passing, I just started thinking a lot more about my times out there, and about the good times, and just remembering how valuable those memories are. So the more I started talking and more I started sharing, the more I started remembering, and this and that, and that's kind of how the blog came about. And I've always been a creative guy, and it's funny, I've always liked writing, but I've always needed kind of an excuse to write. Outside of being in school, I never found much of a chance to sit down and write. So it just kind of a way to get some actual writing out. I found an excuse to write something, and I love to draw. I sketched the cover out, and so yeah, I don't know, just seeing all the support from my friends kind of started getting me sharing stories, and it just sort of all kind of evolved into the book.
I remember when I first saw your blog pop up, and it wasn't immediately clear who you were. It was like, okay, this is somebody that clearly worked with Prince, because his stories they're too detailed to you couldn't make that up. You couldn't make and everything, and they ring true with all the other stories we've heard about him. So I was like, who's this guy? And then you posted a few more blogs, and I was like, wow, this is really, really great stuff. So I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your stories, because part of the reason that we do this series is called Uncovering Prince, and we've done quite a few interviews so far, and a lot more to come. And every person that we talk to, I feel like that uncovers a different layer of him, because the one thing that we always say, it keeps coming up, that when he was here, you only saw what he wanted you to see, as far as being fans and the public, and so now that he's gone, and we have to look at how his legacy plays out, and how we pay tribute to him, and how we show our love and support for him, it's really important to humanize him, and hear these stories from the people that were there and the people that were around, because they're all just so valuable in getting deeper to who he was, and I think for me, a large part of his songwriting and his path in life was him trying to figure out who he was himself. Even he didn't know. He was trying to figure it out, and that was his journey. And that's why we do it. So thank you, Andy, for coming to talk to us. The book is out now. It's called That One Time with Prince. You can get it on Amazon. And we hope you enjoyed this interview. Definitely check out the book. I'm Casey Rain.
I'm Kim Camellia. We have to be quick because the battery is running out. just say your name and I'll say.
All right. I'm Griff. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Catch you next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.